of a sudden, virtually overnight, somebody recognised it, used it on their channel, and away we went. Now I'm up to, I think, about 280,000. It's all kind of 15, 16, 17-year-old kids going, wow, you're the guy on TikTok, you're the guy on Instagram, you know. It never enters my mind that I'm 78. We've got a mega problem in this country with child obesity. And he slowly lifted his head like that and he looked at the back of the room. And I was standing beside the cameraman and he answered the question about Kairos, and then he said, right, that's it, thank you, goodbye, and he got up and left the room. I think Fury's past it now.
Yes, we are back at it, The Real Life, and this week's guest, yes, I've got him. It's Frank Gilfeather. Frank, how you doing? It's great to see you.
Thank you very much. It's great that you've come all this way to Aberdeen to do this.
No, thanks very much for inviting me into the gym and meeting the guys and things like that. It's absolutely fantastic. But how's life in general, Frank?
Well, I've been reinvigorated by what's been happening because, you know, the social media stuff has been off the scale, and it's been very quick in terms of when we decided to do it. The TikTok channel took about 18 months and we built up, and it was just tremendous, you know. And we kind of fiddled away with Instagram without really pushing it too much. Nothing much was happening there. Then all of a sudden, virtually overnight, somebody recognised it, used it on their channel, and away we went. And now I'm up to, I think, about 280,000 today.
Yeah, it's about 280,000. Were you kind of mesmerised, Frank, the way the trajectory this was going at some stage? It was incredible, the way it's just blown up.
Well, I think the big thing for me is, I think we did the analytics, and it's something like 37% of the audience are Americans. And so you get all these guys not knowing where you're based saying, oh, can you come to my gym? Can you come and take, or can I come to you? And I've said, do you realise I'm in the northeast of Scotland? You know, it's not that easy. But you're absolutely right. It's been kind of mind-blowing in terms of the reach and the engagement. And this is the great thing that's encouraged me. Because I'd probably be put off if I had a lot of adverse comments. But I have the opposite. I've got a lot of people who compliment me on what I'm doing, but also encourage me, and certainly a younger audience. When I get guys, for example, saying, I've started boxing and I do everything that you teach on your video, and it's made me a decent boxer, or it's made me a better boxer if they've already been doing it. So that's the big deal for me.
Would it be fair to say, Frank, a lot of people, you've inspired them to get to the gym, all age groups, maybe 20, 30, 40, even 50s and 60s. Have you got all good feedback like that, Frank?
I get a lot of that. I mean, I'll tell you what, every day, somebody somewhere on a comment says to me, I used to box, now I'm middle-aged, or I'm in my 60s, I get that, and I'm overweight, and I'm unfit, but seeing you do what you do has inspired me to go back into the gym and just punch the bag and keep fit, you know. Because for me, I'm not terribly interested in the bigger world of boxing, you know, the world champions, all that stuff. I'm interested in grassroots, and I'm interested in what's been done at local level and the boxing clubs. And these guys, and I've said it 100 times, these guys that open these gyms to give amateur boxers in their own communities space and time and expertise, they're the heroes for me, and that's what I want to push.
How does that make you feel, Frank, getting that positive feedback from all those age groups? That must feel good.
It's incredible, because I used to be a TV reporter and presenter up in the northeast of Scotland, so being recognised was quite commonplace for me wherever I went in my area and beyond, in fact. But the fact is that, it was usually kind of middle-aged, elderly people who would come up and speak to you. Now, if I'm in a shop or if I'm walking down the street when a school is coming out, it's all kind of 15, 16, 17-year-old kids going, wow, you're the guy on TikTok, you're the guy on Instagram, you know.
Yeah.
And I was in buying some gear in a sports shop yesterday, and one of the young guys who was serving me, he said, "You're not that old guy from TikTok, are you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the old guy." "Yeah, all right, we could get a picture taken." Of course. So it's kind of, the demographic has shifted. Instagram is different, of course, because they seem to have a kind of older audience, generally, over the board. I get so much encouragement from people just to...
Do you know what I like about you, Frank? You've not got an ego. People admire you. You've got an attitude of gratitude. You're very humble. Where do you get that from?
My dad. I remember when I became the senior champion of Scotland, and I remember the next morning, it happened in the music hall in Edinburgh on a Saturday night, and these were the days when if you were going to win a Scottish championship, you had 3 fights in the one night. Nowadays they do it over a series of weekends. And I remember my dad came out, and I was feeling, I wasn't kind of over the top or anything like that, but I was feeling pretty pleased with myself. And he said to me, "Remember, feet on the ground." And that kind of brought me back down if I was going up. Not that I was terribly, but I think, listen, what's the big deal? I'm doing something I love, and people are liking it, they're buying into it, and that's my reward. So it's good fun. You know, I'm lucky. That's the bottom line. I'm lucky to do this. I think that's the big deal for me.
Do you feel your dad shaped you into the man that you are today, Frank?
Yeah, he did, of course. Because we are family orientated, my dad had hard upbringing, right? As his dad was killed in World War I, day one of the Battle of Loos, September in 1915. And so he was left, one of 4 boys. He was 6. But my father was a very strong character, and you can even sense it wherever he went. And he was revered as being a strong character, but also being a man of humility and integrity. And I used to tell people, you know, my dad never smoked nor drank. He always had booze in the house. But that was because people would come to visit him and, generally speaking, ask him for money. Because maybe they had a booze problem. And that was fine. And if he knew them and he trusted them and he knew he was going to get it back, that was fine. He would never turn anybody away. And we were brought up with that ethos of, you're just a normal guy, and if you can, wherever you can, try and do some good. And so he ran boxing clubs all through the, generations. And my 2 elder brothers, they were boxers. The oldest one, Dan, was a British youth champion, but he gave up when he was 15. And Dennis, he boxed for Scotland, was a Scottish champion. And then he went and started his own club and did really well, produced 2 ABA champions, Jim Douglas and Stuart Ogilvie. And Dennis was in big demand as a boxing referee all over the world, an amateur referee, refereed 2 finals in the 1972 Olympics. So it was right. For me, I'd kind of dropped out. Once I stopped boxing, that was it. I didn't go near a gym for years and years and years.
What do you think your dad would say to you now, Frank, if he could see you, what you're doing in this noble intention that you have for these young guys and fighters coming through? What do you think he would say to you now, Frank?
Well, he'd be very, very pleased. My dad was never one to give us praise. And we were not a family of huggers and kissers or anything like that. But it was such a tight-knit, everybody in the family, my 2 brothers and my sister, we revered my dad. And my mum she recognised that at that stage of our lives, the boys, boxing was our lives. My dad was heavily involved at a senior level, as an administrator, the old Scottish Amateur Boxing Association, and then with the British Amateur Association. So it was all, people came to the house, they came to talk about boxing. The coach would come from his club, somebody else, boxers. He was always seeing to things and seeing to people, if you know what I mean. They were, so I think he'd be really pleased. He'd be proud. He probably wouldn't tell me.
Do you miss him, Frank?
I miss him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally miss him. He was a rock of a man, you know. And when I look back on his beginnings and the unemployment and the poverty, and we lived in a place which I guess you could call was a ghetto of Irish and Glasgow Irish immigrants. And it was just known as Tipperary, this little ghetto. Well, he did. He was brought up there. And he was devoted to his mother. And he'd certainly visit his mother 3 or 4 times a week. And on a Sunday, we went to my granny's every Sunday for Sunday lunch. And that was the tightness of him. She worked in the mills till she was 78, in the jute mills. My dad was working in the jute mills when he was 10. And they would escape school, play truant. Him and loads of others. He wasn't the only one. And they would go and take employment in the jute mills until the school board caught up with them, dragged them back to school, and then they would stay at school for a few weeks and do the same again because they needed to get money. It was so bad. And so when you come through that hardship and the difficulties and the unemployment and, the discrimination there was, then you realize that what he did was sacrifice a hell of a lot for us. And so I see that as every generation's duty to do the same. Sounding like St. Francis here. But you know what I mean? I think it's your duty, if you have a family, you try to make, you want them to be better than you were. And I think that's why he sacrificed so much.
See, if I could say to you, Frank, you could write in a text message or an email asking your dad how you've done and performed in your life since he passed, what would you ask him?
You mean in terms of what, asking for his affirmation or what he thinks I've done?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would probably say to him, give me a critique of what you think I'm doing and what I have been doing. Actually, what I do know is that he was terribly proud of the fact when I was on TV. Now, can you imagine it? There was a kid who grew up in abject poverty for a while. He struggled to get a job. He got an apprenticeship as a butcher, worked as a butcher for years and years, and then when the NCR factory, National Cash Register, opened in Dundee, everybody wanted to go there because the pay was bigger. So he got a job there as a clerk, but still heavily involved in boxing. Heavily involved. And so what happened is he had to remember his beginnings. He had to remember where he came from. And he always taught that to us. Be true to yourself. Don't go along with things because you think it's going to please somebody else. But at the same time, see everybody else's point of view. Don't think that you know everything. See people's point of view. And even if you don't believe what they're saying or agree with it, then at least allow them to have their say. So I would say to him now, if I was to send him an email, what do you think? How do you think it's going for me? And how do you think, give me a critique on how you think I have lived my life.
I think he'd be certainly proud of you, man. Honestly, Frank, the energy, the vibrancy, the mindset that you have for your age, it's totally incredible. It's fantastic. I'm mesmerised how you find it. It's
the age thing is just, I never think of that. It never enters my mind that I'm 78. Sometimes I think of when I used to go to a gym, for example. And what you've got to remember is before social media, and I used to coach at a gym in Aberdeen here, And nobody knew who I was. I was just some old guy that would come up for every session and get on with it. I'd do my 3-round skipping, 3-round shadow boxing, 3 rounds on the bag. The only thing that was in the exercises on the floor and all that stuff, the only thing that was missing for me was I would love to have got into the ring and sparred. But of course, you can't do that at my age because, not because of me, but because I think you would get young guys going, what's going on in this place? You know, what is this, a care home or what? You know, so I used to get that kind of, without them actually saying it, I remember 2 kids I'm trying to coach on a bag once, and they weren't terribly interested. You know, some of them are really kind of into it, and others just go there and go through the motions. And one of them said to me, did you box? And I said, yeah, I boxed when I was young. And he said, how many fights did you have? And I said, 200, give or take 5, you know. And they went, yeah, sure, 200. But they couldn't get it in their mind that it was possible to have 200 fights. Nowadays, 200 fights as an amateur is a virtual impossibility. You know, you're becoming a Scottish champion after about 6 fights sometimes, you know. And you don't have the level of contests that we did when I was growing up. Every club had maybe a show 3, 4, 5 times a year. We had a monthly show in our gym with about an audience of about 50 or 70, but we were boxing regularly against other guys from other clubs.
What advice can you give to guys out there that are struggling mentally, Frank, that they should be getting down to the gym? What advice can you give to them in this day and age to get them down here? What do you reckon? Well,
this is a key thing for me. You hit upon an interesting point here, because boxing for me is not just about going in and the end result is being a boxer. The vast majority of people who come to a gym probably don't want that. And you know, if you said to them, you want to go in and spar, they would say, well, not really, you know. And to be honest with you, I advise young boxers not to spar until they've been to the gym and training properly and learning for a long, long time. You know, maybe 3 months, or maybe more, depending on how they're developing. But as far as people with mental health problems are concerned, I think the fitness element is fantastic if you're feeling down, if you're feeling low, and you can get yourself off the sofa and out to a gym. Now, here's the thing. Amateur clubs will hate me for this. I tell everybody, get down to your amateur club. Knock on the door. Now, what I've seen during my travels throughout Scotland to different amateur clubs, I've seen the odd guy with a white hair or bald and maybe middle-age spread, and he looked out of place among all these boxers. But the feeling I got from seeing that was, good for you. You've come down here, and you've probably had that barrier where you've said, I'm going to look daft. You know, I'm pulling on a tracksuit, I'm 60, I've got a big belly, you know, I've got white hair. I'm going to look daft and out of place. Don't think that. Do you know what? Boxing clubs are so welcoming. We're all in it for the same reason. We're all in it to keep fit, to learn something, to punch the bag, to get all the stress out, to get the endorphins going around in your mind so that when you go back out the gym, you're feeling on top of the world. Now, somebody with depression or mental health problems, to do that, and you know, I would urge them to do that, because they would leave the gym 2 or 3 times a week. It would change their lives. I absolutely believe it would change their lives.
It's down to character building, if you ask me, Frank. That's one of the most important factors. Coming down to the gym, letting the steam off, as you say, getting in there and just being yourself. It's total. That's for success, I reckon, if you ask me.
I think the big thing for me about boxing is you are on your own. I played football as a kid. I was never any good, but it never appealed to me. The boxing thing appealed to me because, well, it was ingrained in me. I was at the boxing club from the age of 4. And it appealed to me because you take responsibility for yourself. So there's that kind of pressure on. There's nobody responsible. It doesn't matter about their coach. He can tell you everything in between rounds that he thinks you need to know. However, you're on your own because, as you know, anything can change in the course of a 3-minute round. The guy can set up differently. He could change his tactics. You could hurt you. Things change. Nothing stays the same within that 3 minutes. You have got to be able to adapt, and you've got to be able to know how to contend with those changes. That puts the responsibility on you, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, that's the thing. The thing I don't get is in boxing, people think you come down and gym to take somebody's head off. It's not about that. It's to get in there, build your character, find out who you really are, get that confidence moving, get it going. That, to me, that's what the government have to look at. Just look at the knife crime down in London at this moment in time. There's kids killing kids every single day. It is ridiculous. The government have to look at this. Sadiq Khan has to look at this down in London. Get the guys enrolled in programmes, get the ex-fighters involved, guys like yourself doing seminars. Trust me, it would definitely save lives.
Well, you're right, and I always say, and I've said it before, the guys who run boxing clubs are heroes for that very reason. They're social workers. They're doing the work of the police. They're keeping kids off the street, away from potential crime, petty crime, and all that. Up here in Aberdeen, I wrote to the Assistant Chief Constable about 3-4 years ago, and I said, this is what you need to be doing. You need to be engaging with young people in boxing clubs, not just boxing clubs, but for me it was boxing clubs. You need to be seen in boxing clubs because they need to see you not as the enemy, which they do now. They need to see you as part of the scene. Oh, there's Constable so he pops in every other week. He's part of the scene, right? Now, if you get that, and you also get further education people coming up 2 or 3 times a year, and give them an office and a desk in the gym and say, we've got this guy, 16, he's leaving school next week, go on and give him some advice. So you've got further education, you've got the police, and any other agency, you've got job centres, that kind of thing, coming in to speak to young people who are at that vulnerable age, 15, 16, when they could drift off into crime, perhaps, into, petty crime.
And that is the age, Frank. They go at 15,
That's
16,
right,
they find drug culture, knife culture, womanising, all that kind of stuff. And it has to be looked at, and we need good guidance and guys like yourself, and there's tons of ex-fighters in the UK that would definitely be interested in a programme like that. It would save lives.
Well, you would think so, but you look at Ulster, for example. Ulster have got a great programme where if you're a boxing club and you're setting up, you go to the local authority, they will make sure that you have funding to do what you want to do. Because they see it, for the same reason as I do, they see it as a bonus for communities all across the province. So if you did that in Scotland, for example, or anywhere in the UK, and get them off the streets, and try and keep them there, and actually what you find is, they'll love it. And they'll love it. They might not become boxers, and they might not become champions, but being in the gym and being part of this boxing community within an amateur club will make them feel better. And I think you're building better citizens through that kind of campaign.
Yeah, you're giving yourself discipline in your life. You're giving yourself a structure, something to work towards, goals, things like that. As you say, sitting on that couch, it's not going to do you any good at all. No. It has to be looked at, certainly, by the government, if you ask me.
I agree with you. I think I'd love it to see, okay, the government will argue, for example, through Sports Scotland, we give money to amateur boxing. And so it's a hands-off kind of deal. There's the money, you get on with it. Of course, in Scotland, and you'll know about my criticism of Boxing Scotland, that goes, I think, in the main, to the elite boxers. And the boxing clubs who pay a lot of money every year for the registration of the club, of the boxers, for their medical cards, child protection certificates and courses that they all have to go through. they're kind of laying out a heap of money. These boxing clubs have got to knock on doors of potential sponsors and said, can you give us a couple £100, or could you help us with this? Can we do that? And they shouldn't have to do that.
No, 100%. Yeah, guys like you've got like Terry McCormick, Bert McShane. The guys know who I'm talking about here. They're the unsung heroes. They should be getting spoke about. As she says, money goes to boxing Scotland, only goes to elite boxers.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there's some guys in there that are doing a cracking job. Stephen Simmons, Ricky Burnswell. I mean, I don't know the other guys, but they do a great job, some of them. But there's a few that I don't know. But as I say, it's the unsung heroes that don't get spoke about enough. The guys at the clubs who are doing it for nothing. Yeah. They do it for absolute to keep the kids off the streets, and that's got to get spoke about a lot, if you ask me.
Well, you're right, because they're not just doing that, running the boxing club 3 or 4 times a week. They're going to shows. You know, I'll give you an example. It was at the Scottish Championships that have just passed. There's a club up here in the northeast of Scotland who took their boxers down for 2 days, right? I don't know how many, I think there were half a dozen boxers. Half of them were boxing on the Saturday, and the others were boxing on the Sunday. The ones who were boxing on the Saturday were okay, they competed. But their club mates who were boxing the following day had to pay a tenner each to watch their club mates.
It's terrible. That's terrible.
And so you're thinking, are you trying to actually close clubs down? Yep. Because that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You'll get guys that are going to be fed up and they're going to say, I can't afford this. You know, a lot of guys are dipping in their own pockets to pay for this, that and the other. Things that they should have a kitty, in my view. Boxing Scotland, instead of taking money, should be distributing the money they get from government through organisations like Sports Scotland and saying, right, we'll help you.
Yeah, they're getting that money for Sports Scotland, and they're charging the clubs at the shows the entrance fees. That's all wrong, if you ask me. It's ridiculous, Frank.
It's terrible.
Ridiculous.
It's terrible, and it's not good. And you know, and while we've got to recognise that the elite boxers, well, I've got an issue with this. I was an elite boxer. You could call me, Dick McTaggart was an elite boxer. Well, you don't get him any more elite than Dick McTaggart. Ken Buchanan, when he was an amateur. There's so many, Bertie Scott in Glasgow, so many high quality who boxed Olympics, who boxed in the Commonwealth Games, who won ABA titles. They were elite boxers. They trained in their own gym 4 times a week after their work. Now we've got a scenario where, for some bizarre reason, in my view, we have elite boxers in the High Performance Centre in Glasgow who are, in effect, told that they need to be there every day. In other words, full time, without any pay. So, and this is a worrying scenario. I'm hearing things like boxers who have apprenticeships are told, no, you can't do this and have an apprenticeship. You can't go to university and be in the elite squad. And so you've got all this kind of thing weighing on a young man's mind, a young man who's kind of trying to set out on his road. Plan. Yeah, and he's being told, you can't do this, you can't do that, you know. And so my question is this: do we really need a high performance centre? And the answer I always come up with again and again is no. Why can't what do these elite boxers get from being in the high performance centre that they can't get in their own gyms?
Do you feel this has to be looked at, Frank?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I think there must be an incredible waste within boxing Scotland. Mm-hmm. And so you've got guys who, well, I'll tell you a story. I met not so long ago, at the end of last year, I met a director, a guy on the board of Boxing Scotland. By the way, apart from one, not one of the members on the board have any experience of boxing. And as far as I'm aware, none of them actually go to the amateur shows. So here's the question. What do they do? What does the board do? apart from handing over power to one or two guys. And then you've got to wonder, why do we need the performance centre? You know, it's a waste of money, and it's actually sucking up money from the clubs which they can't afford.
Yeah, it should go back to the old way, Frank, you reckon?
Yeah. I mean, this sounds terribly kind of negative, but I think my way would be positive. So if you can produce Olympic champions, British champions, Commonwealth Games, you know, guys like John McDermott in Glasgow, John McNair in Glasgow, all these wonderful fighters that came from all over Scotland, Dick McTaggart, my goodness me, from Dundee. If you can produce these boxers who performed and won at the highest level when they were doing it in their own clubs with their own coaches, now that's a key thing.
Yeah.
No, why would you want as a coach to take your star boxers and say to a stranger, which in effect is what the national coach would be to these guys, here you are, here's my best boxer, you take him from now on.
I think that's a very strong standpoint. If you're the trainer of that fighter, how can you put that trust in someone else that doesn't know them as better? You have to know the fighter. You need to know the fighter completely, what they do when they train. It's huge. And I think that rule should be changed, Frank, going forward.
I think I'm all for that, you see, to get that, to wipe that out. But forget about the coach. What about the boxer? So you go and you box in a strange land with a strange trainer in your corner. It's not good. I've done it. You know, I understand that not every coach can go abroad because of the expense with his fighter. But if you're handing over your boxer on a daily basis, saying, right, you take over, and in effect you're waving goodbye to your own boxer. Maybe you've had him since he was a kid, and you've brought him up and you've taught him the proper way of doing things, and then you hand over to this guy and you wonder, is he going to improve him, or is he just going to make him worse?
It's a trust factor, Frank. We're in the hurt business. You have to, the guy in your corner has to believe in you, has to know you, what you, as I said, when you train, what you do best, what you don't do best.
Yeah.
He has to know you completely. You can't hand him to some stranger that you don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
There's too many cooks involved, if you ask me, Frank. It's got to be the one trainer and the one fighter, not 2 and 3. In people's ears, it's no good whatsoever.
See, I don't know what, I mean, I express ignorance here in terms of boxing Scotland. I don't know what they all do. I do not know on a 9-to-5 basis what they can possibly all do to merit what I'm told are kind of substantial salaries. Yeah. Now you've got, for each district, you've got a development officer. I have no idea what that development officer does, and neither, incidentally, do the board. Because when I met that director of the board, who was kind of keen to get me involved in some way, because I kept putting out the message on my social media channels to say, you know, you must start to recognise you're sucking the clubs dry. These guys are doing all the work. You're taking all the glory with the elite squad. And you've appointed development officers on reasonably good salaries, I'm told.
Oh, it's good money. I know the salaries these guys get, and it's ridiculous what's going on.
I said to this director, tell me, what does a development officer do? And he said, I have no idea. And I said, but you, as a board, have appointed this guy and that guy and another one. Yeah, and they're paid all this money. It's coming out the coffers. What do they do? I don't know. So there you are. There's money that's taken from clubs to given to jobs that the board of directors have no idea what goes on.
It's like taking to the poor and giving to the rich in boxing. That's well, because these guys have got their salaries.
That's precisely it.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just touching back, Frank, obviously on this journey, you've got your son Paul, who's contributes a lot to your video content, your seminars, gets you from A to B, things like that.
He does.
How important is that for you?
Well, Paul runs the show for me, if you like, and thank goodness he does, because he's the guy that's got to deal with all the comments and the questions. And we sell our own bag mitts, and he's the guy that looks after all that. Now, we sold probably about 200 of these bag mitts in the last, 3 months? and they come from all over the world. And I've got a nation. You see, the reason I did that is because all the kids now wear these super duper looking sparring gloves on the back, and because the thumb is attached by a piece of elastic here to the main part of the glove, then that's the way their hand is, right? So the glove is telling you, this is the way your hand will be inside me, when in fact the old the old bagments would have the flexible thumb that could wrap round and be able to clench a fist, hit with the knuckle part of the glove. Whereas that one, they're actually in danger of hurting their hands. I tried them. A glove company sent me 3 pairs. And I thought, these look fabulous. Black and gold, metallic blue was another one, and all red. And I thought, great. So I'm fine. Oh, my hands are like this, inside, not properly closed. So I thought, okay, this is what they're all wearing. And I found that I'm actually hitting with the bottom part of the fingers. And I was getting pain. Tried them about 3 or 4 times. And I went back, I had an old pair of bagments I had for about, 30 years. And I dug them out, and I started wearing them. And I thought, well, what if we got greater padding, but we kept the flexible thumb? And so when I go around the clubs, I was down at Johnson in Renfrewshire the other day at the Four Corners gym. And the guys were, all had their sparring gloves. And I said, go on, take them off, try them. And they were able to do it. And they went, wow, what difference. We can actually punch properly,
Is the feedback good, Frank, you're getting for this year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we took that on. Paul deals with all of that and all the inquiries. We get them, we sell them all around the world. Now, listen, I'm absolutely adamant that you must know that I never started all this to think about some kind of commercial enterprise. It's just that what I felt, I thought, I can't wear these. How can these kids wear these sparring gloves and then punch? They were slapping. And I asked some of the guys at Johnston the other day, let me see you throw a hook. And the vast majority of them would throw a hook like that, inside of the glove. And they can't do that. They just can't. So these gloves, and when I gave them and said, you try them, now try throw a hook properly like that.
Did they feel the difference, yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So there, that's kind of a spin-off of it. That's the least important part of it. Yeah. Me going around the gyms and all that. And, what I'd love to do, and it's not for me, I would love some organisation to recognise, just as you said, Mark, that this is a kind of thing that young people need in their lives, right? And if they were to say to me, we like what you're doing, we'll help you, that would be a big deal for me.
All this is good guidance, Frank. You need good guidance in life for success.
You need fun, and you need to be not too serious with it. I get a lot of fun from the seminars, and we get a lot of good feedback, and you could tell at the end of it. I mean, down at Johnston, there was 60 people there, and everyone at the end wanted a picture taken. And it was, and I'm going, hang on a second, it's only a training session, but actually, the picture session was good because we got a bit fun out of it. We got joking and jostling and all that, and can you imagine if you're a guy of any age who knows for 2 hours of the day they're going to be reinvigorated and they go back and they're feeling fantastic. And the other thing too, Mark, I must mention is I get asked a lot about nutrition, what to feed, and we've got a mega problem in this country with child obesity. I see it all the time. You see the kids pulling the salty stuff and the fizzy drinks off the shelves in the supermarket.
Fish suppers and all that stuff. It's terrible.
Yeah.
West of Scotland diet's awful. Absolutely awful.
Yeah, but, and it's a big, big issue now because it's now sparking off kind of it's a pandemic, it kind of seemed to start in America where it all went. I was listening to the radio yesterday, and somebody was saying how they went 30 years ago, 40 years ago, to America, and the thing that they were gobsmacked about was how large the people were. Now it's been imported to the UK. Listen, that's all government money. It should be going into places like boxing to say, okay, you're doing the work of a social worker. You now should be doing the work of a health worker, because that's what you're doing as well, health, fitness. And we should get people coming in and telling kids, get rid of the fizzy drinks, get rid of the rubbish in your life, and maybe you'll feel better. Maybe you'll put 10 years on your life.
Yeah, get them mentally switched on.
Sure.
Mental toughness is the biggest factor. So if you've got mental toughness, you can get there.
Yeah.
But you need good guidance, Frank. You need somebody there telling you the right things.
That's true.
It's but obviously, just talking about Paul here, how proud are you, Paul, Frank?
Yeah, Paul's. I'm proud of Paul, actually, because Paul had a stellar career in journalism. He was a political editor of the Sunday Mirror. He was in Fleet Street for 13 years. Whitehall editor of the Daily Mirror, he reached a very high level at a young age. So I was kind of in awe of him, thinking, this is marvellous, It's just what I was saying earlier about, how my dad would be doing stuff to make sure that his kids were better off. That's how we think. But I'm proud of all my kids because they've all kind of worked hard, and they know the merit of kind of putting a shift in it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. If you want to reach your goal and you're ambitious enough, I don't consider myself remotely ambitious, but I'm keen to get to do things. They're the same, and they delivered. So Paul, he's carrying all the weight for me just now in terms of the admin and that kind of stuff.
What characteristics have you nurtured into Paul to make him a good journalist and things like that? What have you taught him, Frank?
I don't know. You know what? It's like boxing. It's like my dad. My dad was never an actual coach. He wasn't in the corner. He was an official, judge, referee, administrator, all that stuff. But he would sit down with me and we'd talk, and it would just be about, it was all subliminal stuff. The things he would say weren't actually kind of lessons as such. But from what he was saying, you would take it, you admired certain people that he admired. You admired his thinking about certain things. You admire the fact that he was a rabid socialist and stood up for people. And I think that you could never shake that off. If you could shake that kind of stuff off and become a different person, then you'd be, I don't know what you'd be. You would be, it would be a difficult thing to do. I think that's what I'm trying to say for me. It's
having a big heart. You need a big heart. You need grit, determination to succeed in life.
Yeah, you do. You do. But you know what? More importantly, you need to be a nice guy. And by that, I mean, I'm not sitting down, this sounding like I'm kind of smarmy, but I'm not. I think you need to give people the time. I think you need to engage. And if somebody is a bore and comes up to you and wants to chat to you and all that kind of thing, I've seen guys where I will cut them right at the start. I can't do that. I'm a big softy when it comes to that kind of thing. I could never bring myself to say, sorry, but I've got to go now. You just got to let people want to talk to you. Just let them unload on you. So I think that's a key thing. We've all dealt with people in our lives who are not nice people. And you just cut them off and think, well, I tried my best with you and to engage with you and all that, but if you're not going to, that's fine. That's your opinion. If you don't like me, that's fine.
Time is the most expensive thing that we spend in life because we can't get it back, Frank.
Yeah.
Giving somebody your time is one of the most important things in life, if you
ask me.
The
other thing too is, in your job, you know, I think we went through a period too long, in my view, of workplace bullying, for example. And I used to hear horrendous stories from people who, and you know, when I worked in television, and you would get girls crying and what was wrong? Oh, the boss said you're rubbish or whatever, you know. And I would go on. I was the father of the chapel, which is the shop steward for the branch, the journalist branch within your workplace. I was that for 8 years at Grampian Television. And I would have to go in to the head of news and current affairs and just remind them that we're all in the boat, same boat, you know. Yeah. He's got a position, but we've all got positions. You can't just go, you know, there are ways of telling people, maybe you're not good enough or whatever, there are ways. But the bad way is when we went through this kind of whole era, I thought, of workplace bullying, where people thought it was a big deal to be a bully in the workplace. And they took great reward from being like that.
Did you ever experience anything like that at work, Frank? Like bullying in the workplace? Did you ever experience that firsthand, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say bullying. I think the fact that you get people who are just not nice, you know, and you cut them off. I've never experienced bullying myself. I've experienced kind of differences of opinion, but then you have to let it go. And you say, well, that's your. But I don't go in for the. I've seen it, the shouting, the bawling. I've seen it in my at a distance from my life as a football writer and a football reporter.
Is there any type of wisdom in this life that you can share with us that you've learned, Frank, in this life?
Well, I think you need to treat people properly. I think you need to give them their place, right? Everybody's got a job to do. Now, as a football writer and a football reporter, I spent many years being on the receiving end of stuff from various managers, particularly Alex Ferguson, because we had a kind of hate relationship almost, because he was a difficult man. Now, you cut this guy some slack, because in his way he was a genius, right? He was supernatural almost in his ambition. He wanted to be the best. He needed to be the best. I remember saying to him once, it's a Tuesday night, it's February, there's nothing on, no football, nothing to see here. You sit in and watch telly with your wife, with Kathy? And he said, no. Well, what would you do? He said, well, for example, if somebody had phoned me the previous week to say, there's a young midfield player, plays for Stranraer Reserves, and Stranraer Reserves are playing Clyde Reserves in Stranraer on Tuesday night in February. You should go and see him. He said, I would drive down and see him. Now, that's the devotion which takes people like him into the stratosphere. That's what makes him the best manager, arguably, ever produced by this country. But the other side of the coin is, with that, you've got to recognise that people, like journalists, for example, have a job to do. And while you may dislike them, you cannot treat them like your serfs. And you've got to recognise that's what that guy does for a living.
Yeah, got to respect that, think you? Was you a hard man to deal with, Ferguson, your broadcasting times, Frank, though?
He was unpredictable. Mm-hmm. He was a guy who you didn't know where you were from day to day, right? And if you took exception to an interview you did or a player that you interviewed, or because here's the thing, I kind of crossed those different eras where I would have the home phone numbers for all the players that I needed, right? But when he came, that all changed. Now, he didn't need PR people. He was the PR person. He was the barrier. PR people now are the barriers, right? They call themselves PR people or media officers and all that, but actually they do nothing virtually nothing to facilitate the need of the media. Yeah. What they do is they put the barrier between the media and the football club. And so he started that change. And so when I was phoning players, for example, said, well, would you come on my programme on Friday night and be interviewed about the game? And they would say, then they got scared. Oh, you need to speak to the manager. Why you need to? I don't want to speak to the manager. I want to speak to you.
Did he shield his players, do you think, a lot over journalists?
Oh, yeah. This is when it all started. And it came as quite a kind of a shock almost, because I remember phoning a player, I don't know if you remember him, Dom Sullivan. He went and played for Celtic. And I phoned him, I said, Dom, I need you to come on the programme. Yeah, fine. He said, but can you run it past the manager? And I said, why? He said, well, we need to get permission. I said, well, you never needed permission before in the previous regime. Yeah, but we need to get permission now. So Ferguson heard about this, and he said, you need to speak to me. And I said, why? He said, because I decide who goes on TV or who goes in the paper. And I said, you know, if you phoned me up and asked me to come up for a meeting, do you think I would say, I need to run it by my head of news and current affairs? Or do you think I would say, well, could you phone him directly and ask him if you're allowed to speak to me? I said, don't be ridiculous.
Do you know who backs this up a lot? Roy Keane. I've read Roy Keane's autobiography, and he says Ferguson wasn't the nicest person. Don't get me wrong, he's arguably one of the greatest managers of all time, but Roy Keane kind of backs up what you're saying a wee bit there.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Roy Keane is very vociferous. You see,
I like Keane, he's good, he's opinionated, he tells the truth, but he did say, don't be kidded the way Ferguson is all the time. He's not this charismatic character. He doesn't bring it all. He has got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. But sometimes all the greats can be like that. They're up and down. You don't know how you're going to get them.
Well, you're right. I mean, I've seen him. I've seen him being unbelievable. He's brilliant with charities. And he's great with people. I mean, I remember once, for example, being at the traffic lights, and all my kids were in the car, my wife sitting there. He drew up alongside me, and he looked and he saw me, he tooted his horn, and he waves over. And my kids are excited. Oh, it's Alec Ferguson. You know, yeah, and I'm waving back. And see you later. You know, and he's great like that. You know, I've seen him. He's like he's this great kind of charisma, and everybody kind of gravitated to what. But then that's what you find with great people. You know, you look at them, you think, wow, you're in awe of them. You know, but behind closed doors, they can be different and they can be difficult. And if you're a journalist who's trying to get stories from him, or any of his players, you are the enemy.
Would they give you any good stories, Frank, that you'd get first stabs on instead of an article, newspaper? Was the relationship kind of topsy-turvy with you and Ferguson at the time?
Yeah, it was always like that. I mean, well, I was on TV at the time when Ferguson was here, and I remember, for example, I don't know what the argument was, but kind of every other week there was some kind of argument going on. But we went to Munich. Aberdeen were playing in the European Cup Winners' Cup against Bayern Munich in Germany. And that was the night, it was a turning point for me. He agreed with me. It was a 0-0 draw. And I thought, wow, they got their tactics right. They had to get them back. And Ferguson said, we could beat them at Pittodrie. And anyway, after the game, we were all in the bar. And he put a fistful of Deutschmarks onto the bar and said, that's for the press. And we stood there, and he came over to me, and he put his arm around me. Now, he'd been fighting with me the week before. And he put his arm around me, and he said, you'll have a beer. And I said, yeah, thanks very much. You know, I got a beer for Frank, you know. And I said, I'm really happy with how it went for you tonight. I said, so well done, congratulations, because you got it right. Everything went right. I said, but take your arm off my shoulder. And he went, what? I said, get your arm off, because he'd put his arm around. And he said, what's got into you? I said, have you forgotten what you were shouting down the phone to me last week about, whatever it was? And I said, I'm the enemy. And he was calling me, and all the expletives. And I said, have you forgotten that? I said, because I haven't. I said, pleased for you. I said, but don't think we can be pals, because we can never be pals, because I won't stand for your nonsense.
Good for you, Frank.
And that was it. But there was a few like that. And give him his due. You know, he at the time, he would accept that until the next time.
When was the last time you seen him, Frank?
I saw him years ago, many years ago. He came up here with Manchester United, came up to Aberdeen to play a friendly, I think it was a testimonial game. And it was the time when Carlos Queiroz, his assistant, had just left him. And I was working for Sky Sports that day. And I was in the press room afterwards, and they were all asking questions. And I'd asked him a question about Queiroz, and I said, Alec, he had his head down. He didn't see me at the back of the hall, the back of the room. And I said, Alec, how much of a blow is that going to be to lose such a high profile, a good assistant who went to become the manager of Portugal? And I think he meant to be the manager of Real Madrid at the time, to be honest. And if Ferguson had his head down like that, and he could hear the voice, and I knew he recognised the voice, and he slowly lifted his head like that, and he looked at the back of the room, and I was standing beside the cameraman, and he answered the question about Queiroz, and then he said, right, that's it, thank you, goodbye, and he got up and left the room. And everybody in the room, all the other journalists were saying, but we just got started, what?
Did he recognise your voice, Frank? You said
he
that
recognised my voice, yeah, and when he looked up, it was confirmed when he looked at me, answered the question, and exit stage left, he went right out the room.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of legends, Frank, obviously you trained with Sugar Ray Robinson way back. How did that all come about, Frank?
Well, I used to spar with Walter McGowan, who was the world flyweight champion. I helped him with many of his contests. He would say, come through to the house in Hamilton and stay the week, and we'd train 3 times a day, and twice a day we'd spar, once at lunchtime and once in the evening. Other guys came in the evenings, but I was kind of there during the day. And Joe Gans, his manager, had said, next Sunday, when you come to St Cuthbert's Church Hall. We're going to be training there. And I said, why? He said, never mind, just come there, you know. So the following Sunday, I went to St Cuthbert's, and it was packed with people round the edge of the hall, big hall, and it had the punch bags hanging, and it had a full-sized ring in it. And I'm in the changing room. I'm 18, and I'm putting my wraps on, or bandages as we called them. He's bought them out the chemist. Now it's wraps, all the kids have called them wraps. And the door opens, and I look to the left there, and in comes Sugar Ray Robinson. And I thought, it was just like being in a kind of strange bubble.
Starstruck?
Sorry?
You starstruck at the time, like, whoa.
Yeah. And of course it just hit me. Sugar Ray Robinson was on the bill that McGowan was going to be on against McGowan was boxing a guy called Kid Solomon. Sugar Ray Robinson fought Mick Leahy, who was a British middleweight champion. Sugar Ray was on a tour of Europe where he was fighting literally every week to get money to pay the taxman. And so he walked in and he walked up to me, and I'm like this, and I thought, it was just, it was just the elegance of the man. Yeah. He looked, he had a mohair suit on, and he looked so blooming stylish.
This magic dust coming off him, Frank.
Yeah, and not, and of course he used to be a dancer, so he had that movement of a dancer.
Because he tap danced at London Palladium, at the bars in Harlem, New York, he had the pink Cadillac. Yeah. He could knock you out going backwards. He had the hooks, he had the looks, he was a full package.
Everything.
I don't think, even in my lifetime, you'll see another fighter like him, Frank. Do you know that?
No, Sugar Ray Robinson had everything that you needed to be a boxer. He wasn't great at this and great. He was great at everything. Fight, box, defence, attack, different. The repertoire of punches was incredible.
Yeah. And
then and I'm thinking, he said, "How are you? What's your name?" And I said, "Frankie." It was my name in those days. I'm Frankie Gilfeather. Yeah. What would you weigh? And I said, "Oh, I'm a lightweight," or whatever I was at the time. And he, he chatted for, 30, 45 seconds. Then he starts to get changed over there.
Yeah.
And he said, right, guys, let's go. Went into the gym, and I'm on the bag, and he's on the bag next to me. The greatest fighter of all time, as many, including me, reckoned, is boxing next to me. Okay, he was 43 at the time, and he lost to McLeahy, who really was kind of Highland League as opposed to the Premier League in England.
He could knock you out going backwards. His fights to the Raging Bull, unbelievable. I think
Yeah.
he was 40-0 before he got beat with Jake LaMotta, but you say he's the greatest fighter of all time, Frank?
I think so. I mean, and so did Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali thought the same. And if you go back over the years, you see all the great boxing writers and pundits who say the same thing, because he had everything. He was just such a beautiful boxer in every way. Now, since then, of course, we've seen a whole crop of middleweights come through, and some of them are absolutely tremendous. But for me, Sugar Ray, but then I'm an old stager, remember. I can remember back to those days watching Pathy News, going to the cinema, watching Pathy News, reading about him in Ring Magazine or the Boxing News every week. So I'm old-fashioned.
People say to me, how would Floyd Mayweather go? Ray Robinson would have knocked Floyd Mayweather spark out inside 4 rounds. The way he moved, he was the ring general, Ray Robinson. He knew everything. He could beat any style of fighter. He was truly incredible. But just before we close up, Frank, I'd like to get your thoughts on the big one coming up in the Kingdom in Saudi Arabia, Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, for all the marbles on the line. How do you see this fight going down in the Kingdom?
Well, for a start, Fury's a really difficult guy to box because he's 6'9" and he's 20 stone. He's not an athlete by any terms of the imagination. He's because he carries a lot of blubber and so on. But what makes him a world champion is his physique, right? I'm not a huge fan. I think for his size, he does remarkably well. He moves, quite well for a big man. But what you find with Tyson, of course, he can't build combinations because he's too big.
Yeah.
Right, he's too immobile. So he'll hit twice and he'll grab. And that'll be the tactic. He'll jab and cross and grab, or jab and grab. Usyk's old style European, right? And he's a kind of on a kind of like a heavier version of Lomachenko in terms of his movement. The foot movement, so punch and move to the side, could give Fury a problem. Now, I don't know if Usyk's got a big punch. I'm not convinced he's got a big punch for a heavyweight. So I would see Usyk probably winning on points. Or Fury, if he's not fit, and I think there's huge question marks over his fitness generally. I think Fury could blow up, maybe about the 8th, 9th, 10th round, and Usyk then piling on enough pressure for the referee to step in. But what do I know?
Oh, you know a lot, but what's going to be interesting, I think, is the weight that Alexander Usyk comes in at, that he can keep his attributes, his movement, his ring IQ, his foot feints, his head feints. Can he mentally bamboozle Tyson Fury in the early rounds with Fury trying to figure him out?
I think he could, and you know what? I think his tactic will be, because his movement for a heavyweight is pretty good. Usyk, and I think that will bother. See, if you've got a tall guy, if you've got a big guy, and you're a shorter guy against him, and Usyk is not that much short. I don't know what height he is, but I think he's capable of the head movement. If you look at Canelo, for example, he's a short middleweight, right? But his head movement is superb. And you think of him as just the guy that walks in and bang, bang, bang. And you look at Duran, he was the same. Always punch, move the head, because where your head is when you punch is where the guy is going to aim for. But if your head's not there, if it's just moved a little bit, then he's off target. So the head movement is important, and I think there's going to be a big thing for Usyk. He's going to be having to punch, and then move. And I think that's where Tyson might come unstuck, because he will not be able to land his jab as often as he would like to. And on that score, you see, his last fight against Ngannou, and this is the paucity of the heavyweight division, when it's such a bizarre situation when you've got a guy who's had one fight and lost one.
And get a WBC top 10 ranking. It stinks to the core, Frank. It's corruption. I don't care what everybody says. Mauricio Suleiman should be taking a look at yourself. And not all that is down to money and the sanctioning fee, the 5%, whatever he gets. That's detriment to other fighters, your Hergoviches, your Martin Bacolis, these guys like that, and they're not getting the shot. It's complete nonsense. No, that's down to money. It's all it's down to, Frank.
Of course, but then it always was, wasn't it? I think it's got worse.
Yep.
And I think with the advent of pay-per-view TV and the dollar signs are flashing in front of the eyes of the governing bodies, not to say the promoters, I think, that's why we're seeing all these bizarre things, like Jake Paul, Anderson Silva. Sorry, Anderson, he's one of my followers. They're getting big fights and millions of dollars. And who are the mugs? Us. Why? Oh, let's go into DAZN. Let's pay for that. That's a good fight. Really? They're
selling this garbage. My mate calls it wolf tickets. Absolute nonsense. It's just the fact that it's like they see the mob ran the boxing back in the Ray Robinson days, the Ali days. They still do technically when you look at it. Well, that's nonsense what's going on. But listen, Frank, can I push you for a prediction on the Fury Usyk fight before we close up?
Well, now you're trying to put me on the spot because I know what you're going to do. You're going to come back on and say, you got it wrong. Usyk certainly is the winner. I think probably late in the fight it will end in his favour because I think Fury's past it now.
Yeah, I think his legs are gone as well, Frank. You can tell in the guy fight, he wasn't there, but listen, time will tell. It's got to be a cracking fight May 18th, one that's certainly going to get the juices flowing. Frank, I can't thank you enough today. I'm going to leave the stage with you. Anything you'd like to add before we close up?
Well, the only thing I'd like to say is, if you're not involved in amateur boxing, but it tickles your fancy, then join an amateur boxing club. And the other thing I'd like to say is, let's get back to the boxing clubs being at the heart of every community. And I hope to God that politicians out there, even at a local level, are saying, do you know what? We should be putting money into this kind of thing, the way Ulster does, so that, we build better citizens. And that's what we all want.
Nice touch, Frank. Also, we close up here. I've got a wee gift for you, Frank, I'd like to give you. This is a kind of t-shirt that I've made of them with real life boxing, like you have it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, Mark. Great.
No,
I shall wear that when I'm training. Thank you.
Thanks, God bless, Frank. Thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Top man. Good
Thanks
man.
a lot.
Cheers.
Thank you.